So no matter where you are, how bad it seems, or how long it's been, don't you throw in the towel. Don't you quit. Don't you give up. Because God is still with you. God still cares about you. And God still loves you, but He wants a fresh encounter with you. God frequently uses broken people to accomplish His purposes in the world. Over the next few weeks, we're going to look at the lives of some broken folk, how God used them for His glory and the advancement of His kingdom. Moses started out as an extraordinary child, a beautiful baby. Through the providence of God, he got to experience the best of everything that Egypt had to offer. But Moses made a miscalculation that led to a fall that resulted in him being in the wilderness. The good news is, however, it's not too late. God can take your worst mistakes and turn them into miracles He can use. His all-powerful hand can turn things around. It makes me think of the husband who was taking his wife out on a date, and he came rushing in, and she was just about ready to go and said, we won't be able to go on a date tonight. She said, why not? We had planned to go on a date. She said, because the car's not working, there's water in the carburetor. She said, water in the carburetor? You don't know anything about cars, you're not a mechanic. How do you know there's water in the carburetor? He said, because the car's in the bottom of our swimming pool, so I know there's water in the carburetor. Sometimes things are not just working out like you hoped that they would. In this series, it's not too late. Sometimes life doesn't work out like you hope it would. Sometimes there are things out of your control. But then there's sometimes where you've made a mistake or blown it, and you don't quite know how to get it right. The good news is, no matter how bad it's been, it's not too late to turn it around. Moses found that out. Moses had everything going for him. He is called at his birth in Exodus 2:2, a beautiful child, a lovely child, even in the eyes of God. He was born to godly parents. And even when things looked bad or rough for him, he was discovered in the Nile River by the daughter of Pharaoh. And Moses started living large in the big house. He was being raised as Pharaoh's own son. Acts chapter 7, verses 20 to 23 says that he had gotten well educated in all the information of Egypt, that he was extraordinarily talented, extraordinarily powerful, and extraordinarily elegant and eloquent. He had everything going for him. Life was in his grasp. He even had the privilege of being raised by his birth mother in Pharaoh's house through the providential hand of God. At 40 years old, he made the decision of a lifetime. He decided to suffer ill treatment with the people of God rather than enjoy all the benefits of growing up in Pharaoh's house. So spiritually, he made the right decisions, even though it was in a pagan environment. Everything was just right, except one thing. In Exodus chapter 2, Moses sees one of his brethren, one of his Hebrew brethren, being mistreated by an Egyptian. Acts chapter 7 said that Moses supposed that his brethren understood that God had positioned him to be their deliverer. And based on that, we're told he killed the Egyptian. Not only does Exodus 2 tell us that he killed the Egyptian, it says that he looked left and he looked right. In other words, he wanted to see if anybody was going to see what he was getting ready to do. So he was doing it on purpose. Not only did he kill the Egyptian, but it says he buried him in the sand. So he had this thing laid out, and he used his power and his privilege to make his statement. I'm a Hebrew at my core, and I'm going to defend my people. The next day, the text says in Exodus 2 that he came out and saw two of his Hebrew brethren arguing with one another. He comes over to them and he says to them, "Why are you striving with your companion? Why are you brothers fighting?" And then he got the shock of a lifetime. You know the story. One of the Hebrews said, "What business is this of yours? Are you going to kill one of us like you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" Now, yesterday he looked left and looked right. And he didn't see anybody spying on him. But the day after, he discovers that it has been seen by his brethren what he had done. Now, I think I know what happened. I think I know how they found out. Because if there were only 3 people there, and one of them is dead, the Egyptian, and Moses is not telling on himself, then the brother he thought he was helping, the brother he had delivered, went back and I don't know if you know any people like that, who you've invested in, helped, delivered, and they go spread the bad word on you. But not only that, it's hit CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, because we're told that Pharaoh knew about it. So the word had spread in 24 hours. And Moses goes from the White House to the outhouse. Moses' world is shattered. Moses goes from a Mercedes chariot and couture designer clothes and palace living, and he is reduced to being a shepherd. In fact, we're told that when Pharaoh heard, verse 15 of Exodus 2, of the matter, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. In 24 hours, his world was shaken. In 24 hours, his future was gone. In 24 hours, his reputation was destroyed by his own community and by the broader society. Because it doesn't take long. One thing, one time, can destroy things built up over 40 years. And all of a sudden, he's a sheep herder in Midian, the wilderness, rather than the creme de la creme and future leader of the whole nation of Egypt. His world was crushed. There are a lot of people whose worlds have been crushed. That one decision that day, that one mistake, that one miscalculation, and look at how it was done. At virtually the same time he made a spiritual commitment, it was at that same time he entered a spiritual disaster. One minute he's up on the mountain at 40 years old. The next moment, he's laid flat in the valley at 40 years old. Your highest moment can also be your deepest disaster. And you can feel that it's too late. Especially when it's 40 more years and nothing has changed. Because you see, it took him 40 years to reach the top, and he's wandering in the wilderness 40 years later. And the best he can do is lead some sheep. I get to talk to a lot of people who feel like it's too late. I mean, in our day, 40 years old, that's pretty much midlife. And if you're just wondering after midlife because of that perhaps child you had out of wedlock, or perhaps marriage disaster that's shaken you, or a situation where you went the wrong direction and you've been unable to recover, or maybe it's a prison sentence, or a myriad of other things that makes you feel it's too late. Where you live with regrets. If I could only do it over again, I wouldn't have done it that way. I don't know what Moses was thinking. He says he knew God wanted him to deliver the people. I don't know whether he planned to kill one Egyptian at a time until he killed the whole nation. I'm not quite sure what his strategy was, but one thing is clear, he didn't consult God first. He reacted to a situation in front of his face, and it was a bad reaction. Have you ever said a word that you wish you could retract because you were just reacting at the moment? Have you ever done an act that you wish, if I could relive that, I wouldn't have done that, and I wouldn't do that again, because now that person won't speak to you again, even if it's a relative, a close friend, a child, a mate, a parent. But with God, it's not too late. I don't care how bad it's been. I don't care how long it's been. I don't care how hurtful it's been. I don't care how painful it is. When you mix God in the equation, it's not too late. Because look at what happens. In chapter 3 it says, now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. At least he had a father-in-law that gave him a job. The priest of Midian. And he led the flock into the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of the bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. And he said, do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. When you've blown it, when you've had year after year of disappointment, what you need is not, first of all, a new plan or a new program, a new strategy. What you need is a fresh encounter. Moses got an encounter. First of all, we're told where the encounter happened. It happened on the mountain of God. The mountain of God is the place where God's presence is. It's God's hangout. If you want to make up some time that has been lost by failures yesterday, hang out where God's hanging out, because you need an encounter with God. You need to be in an environment, the mountain of God. You need to be in an environment that pushes you toward God. He was leading sheep, but he was leading them in the vicinity of where God was. You want to hang out with people or places that are making a big deal about God, because you need a big change in your situation. He says, as he was doing that, he noticed something, and it blew his mind. I grew up old school, and one of my old school groups was the Delphonics. And some of you remember the Delphonics. And one of my favorite songs from the Delphonics was, Did Not Blow Your Mind This Time. Now, if you don't know that song, it's because you were raised in the wrong neighborhood, but that's a whole nother story for another time. But suffice it to say right now, he saw something that blew his mind. He saw a bush on fire that was not burning. He saw the green still on the leaves of the bush. It wasn't burning up. The wood was not burning up, but it was on fire. That's what you call a contradiction. That's what you call a conundrum. That's what you call something that makes no sense. How can a bush be on fire and it not burn? Let me give you a secret to an encounter with God. When God is ready to change your situation, flip it, twist it, tweak it, turn it. You can expect to see something happen in your life that doesn't make sense. Something that is out of the norm, something that is not part of the plan, something that you can't explain.
We'll return for more of today's message right after this special announcement from Dr. Evans.
Hello, friends. This is Tony and Lois Evans with the Urban Alternative, and we want to invite you to join us on the cruise of a lifetime. It's the Canada-New England cruise, June 25th through July 2nd. It's going to be a great time for us to gather with all of the friends of the Ministry of the Urban Alternative, and the exciting time we're going to have getting to know you getting to know us on this special occasion.
We're going to rest and refocus.
And recommit.
There you go. We're looking forward to seeing you. Join us. It's going to be a really special time with our family. You're going to talk about our guests.
My son, Anthony Evans, will be doing music. My daughter, Priscilla Shire, now the actress, will be also ministering. And then Martha Menizzi will be ministering in song. I'll have the opportunity to share God's word with you. So it's kind of like a great time with the Evans clan and more. And then all the other stops and the activities on the ship. It's going to be just a marvelous time. What I love about it is the theme. It's just breathe. We want you to relax and enjoy your time with us, our time with you. June 25th through July 2nd, 2016. Go on tonyevans.org and they will give you the details on how to register you and your loved ones to join us and our family on our cruise. Looking forward to you joining us.
God bless you.
We now return to today's message.
When God wants to do something different, in spite of you're messed up, in spite of the fact that, like Moses, you're a murderer. Well, maybe you never murdered a person physically, but maybe you murdered some folks' character. Maybe you've destroyed somebody's integrity. Maybe you have used language that has beaten people down. Maybe you've ruined the perspective of somebody. Because Jesus said, even if there's hatred, there's murder, because it emanates from the heart. So there are a whole lot of different kind of murderers. And you don't have to be on death row to be one. You can be one simply because you have devastated the life of another. Even if that has happened, there was an opportunity for a fresh encounter with God. This is true all through the Bible, by the way. Whenever God wanted to do something new, he would do something different. He would tell Abraham to sacrifice his own son. That don't make sense unless, God, you're up to something special. He would get Israel caught between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army. They can't go back and they can't go forward. God must be up to something special, like opening up a Red Sea. Martha and Mary say, our brother's dying. Please do something. Jesus finds out he's dying and he stays back 2 days and lets him die. And then on top of that says in John chapter 11, I was glad that I was not here. How you going to be glad, Jesus, when I'm sad? How you going to be happy when I'm in pain? How you going to be going through a joyful time when I'm in a painful time? He says, because I want to show you something. He says, didn't I tell you this is an opportunity to glorify God? Didn't I tell you I am the resurrection and the life? And by the way, you can't get a resurrection unless something dies. So God lets things die sometime. Moses' career died. Moses' future died. Moses' well-being appeared to be dead until God showed up. This goes beyond a Bible study to have an encounter with God. It may include the Bible because God never skips his word. But an encounter means I get to experience God face to face. Because you can learn about him and not experience him. Moses had the knowledge. He needed a fresh encounter with God. That's why you can go to church and still leave unsatisfied. That's why you can hear other folk talk and leave unsatisfied. You need a fresh encounter with God, and you ought to pursue the mountain of God, his presence, with all of your heart. Well, that's what Moses does. God says to him, Moses, Moses. Now, whenever God calls your name twice, you're in trouble. Moses, Moses. Okay? He says, take off your shoes. But it says God didn't call his name until he saw him turn. See, God didn't just call his name. It says when Moses turned, God called his name. God wants to see what you're going to do. Are you going to ignore the burning bush? Or are you going to go toward the burning bush? He could have said, bush burning, no big deal. He wouldn't have heard his name. Because he only heard his name when he turned, when there was movement toward the mountain, movement toward what God is doing. Don't ignore the extraordinary taking place in the ordinary, especially if you're coming off of 40 years of mistakes, 40 years of pain, extended periods of difficulty. Because the good news here is that it's not too late. He says, Moses, take off your shoes. Why would he take off his shoes? Well, man was made from dirt. Everybody in here is made from dirt. You're only about worth $8 to $10 on a good day, okay? Once you decompose, your value, the nutrients collectively, isn't worth $10. So I don't know how much you think you're worth, but it ain't all that. In fact, if you want to see how much you're worth, just stick your finger in some water and see the dent you leave behind, and that'll show you. It ain't gonna last long. Moses, take off your shoes. In other words, that little leather on your shoes that's separating you from dirt is making you too high. Somebody felt that, I could tell. It's making you too high. You too high. I want you to get back to the dirt. I want you to get back to your humanity. Because what happened 40 years ago was because you thought too much of yourself than you ought to have thought. In other words, I did tell you you were going to deliver my people. I didn't tell you you were going to do it apart from me. I did tell you that I gave you this extraordinary opportunity. I didn't tell you that you were going to go out there on your own and become a murderer to pull it off. In other words, he tried to do a good thing with human methodology. He skipped God to achieve his own goal. In other words, he let being in Pharaoh's house get to his head. Because I'm the son of Pharaoh, I can kill who I want to kill, do what I want to do. You know people like that who think because they got a little edumacation, who think they got a name, think they have some notoriety, think they have some power, think they have some silver spoon in their mouth, think that they have arrived and they can do what they want to do in the name of God. He says, Moses, take off your shoes because this is holy ground. The word holy in the Bible means unique, set apart, or special. This is not an ordinary meeting. This is not another church service. This is not another Bible study. This is a special place with my special presence. And it's the place I want to show you it's not too late. He says, take off your shoes. This is holy ground. Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Now, guess what God tells Moses? I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters. For I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians and to bring them up from the land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorite, Perizzite, and Hivite, and Jebusite. Now behold, the cry of the sons of Israel have come up to me. I have seen their oppression with which the Egyptians are oppressing them. Don't miss this, because it all sinks into the fact that it's not too late. Guess what God tells Moses? While you were rebuilding your life over here, I was dealing with something over here. The children of Israel are being oppressed by the Egyptians, and they're crying out for a deliverer. You messed up 40 years ago. I put you out here in this wilderness to develop you, because the wilderness is always for development. There is deliverance, development, and then destiny. Development is dry spell. It's the place where a lot of fancy stuff is not going on. I had you leading sheep, dirty, smelly sheep. Because over here, 40 years later, there are going to be some other sheep that are going to need some leading. So you messed up 40 years ago, but in your development, I'm going to let you deal with stuff that you think is inconsequential to what you did 40 years ago. But when you make a recontact with me, I'm going to connect you with my purpose. And I'm going to give you a fresh calling, a fresh job, and a fresh ministry. Do you see what God did? God recalled him. You ever had a car that needed to be recalled? He says, Moses, I got a purpose for you. In fact, in chapter 7, verse 1, he says, and I'm going to make you like God to Pharaoh. I'm going to let Pharaoh, I'm going to let you borrow my name when you go to Pharaoh. I'm going to raise you back up. I don't care what has happened in your past. Yes, there are consequences. And if you could have not done it or relive life over again, you wouldn't do it because you don't want 40 wasted years. But that's the beauty about God. He can hit a bullseye with a crooked stick. He can take lemons and make lemonade once you have a fresh encounter with him. He says, Moses, I am not only going to restore you to me, I'm going to use you again. And I'm going to let your practice with sheep answer the prayer of somebody else who's calling on me for deliverance. You don't know they're calling on me. I know they're calling on me. I know you're ready for me. So I'm going to use your return to me to answer their call to me. So I'm going to do a bunch of things at one time. See, that's the beauty of God. While he's developing you, he's preparing somebody else to be impacted by you once your development has been completed. Moses had the good news of finding out that it indeed is not too late. That God can meet you in your mess, and he can turn things around, and he can create a miracle. So no matter where you are, how bad it seems, or how long it's been, don't you throw in the towel. Don't you quit. Don't you give up. Because God is still with you. God still cares about you. And God still loves you. But he wants a fresh encounter with you.
Well, if God can use a murderer like Moses, he can use you. If he can redeem Moses, he can redeem you. And that's why we want you to get a copy of the book, It's Not Too Late. It'll show you how God uses people who've made mistakes, who failed. Once they got redeemed, once they got recovered spiritually, then they became useful, and sometimes in a huge way. Contact us here at The Alternative, 1-800-800-3222, or log on to tonyevans.org and get your copy of It's Not Too Late. Thank you for your support. We need your generous financial support and most of all your prayers so that we can keep God's truth coming your way. God bless you. Look forward to seeing you again next time.